First, if you're starting to look for, obviously, the 8 women on that school board failed in hiring Ernest Winston and not holding him accountable. So if you take that, all right. So now the thing is, what can we do from going on from now? You want to find a candidate who has ran a pretty good large organization, who has got experience in that, who has integrity, and who has shown some type of innovation. Now, based on my theory about woke, I would not want a person to come in there who wants to go ahead and continue to pushing gender identity, who doesn't want to discipline troublemakers, and who wants to continue manipulating equity. I would go against that, because I think all we're going to do is we're going to see the same thing. We may feel good that we found a new candidate, but I don't think the underlying thing is the structure for kids. Kids need a structure. They need to have an orderly thing. They're just like traffic. If no one's following the rules in traffic, you're going to have accidents, and it's going to be chaos. It's the same thing within the school system, within a family. All of these type of things have. And so, as a school board member, that's what I would be looking for. And if you take a look back in the past, why did it take all these other people go in and out so quickly? These 3-year type things that you had mentioned. I think the woke culture has been seeping into our system for years, and you can't run a show when you have all this disturbance underneath. It's just like if you're trying to walk a straight line on a waterbed versus walking on a hard floor. If you're on a waterbed, that thing's going to move around. You're going to have very difficult to do that. That's exactly what's happening in the woke culture to us. Well, I think there are 3 things that I think are all part of this. Is that the first thing is that are they going to disturb the underpinnings of a biological our sex of being male and female? Are they going to go down a road of permitting or encouraging gender identification and these panorama surveys where they ask you in their background, they ask you a little bit about what your gender preferences and stuff like that, which a child shouldn't have that, shouldn't be even thinking about that stuff. That would be one of the first questions I'd ask. The second question I'd ask, are you going to discipline troublemakers? Are you going to set standards of behavior? Because as a child, I mean, even in a family, your mom and dad said, well, you can't do that, you can't do this, but you can do this and you can do that. And they gave you encouragement to do the right things and try to hold you back from doing the wrong things. But we're not seeing that in the CMS school system. They're just like, hey, they run amok. And that's one of the things I would ask of the superintendent. The other thing is, I would still go back to what Martin Luther King said years ago, is to get away from the idea that we all have different colors. For goodness sake, we all are different. God made us all different. Some are taller, some are have good eyesight, some have bad eyesight. Some have no hair. So it's a whole variety of different type things. But we're all unique, and we all have a purpose. We have a purpose. And building character is one of the things I would ask of that superintendent, is that how are you going to build character within our student within our student body? Hope that helps. Well, I agree with the idea of the metal detectors, and I agree with the random searches, and the idea of where you can report through that anonymous site system. I think that's all fine. All right, I agree with that. But I think the underpinning of all of this safety is not having an expectation of behavior, because if you don't have an expectation of behavior, then I think you lose something. And I give you an example. I had the opportunity to go to the Hopewell Town Hall meeting, which was last February, and there the principal, the superintendent, the principal, and one of the members of the CMS school board were there, and they tell about how the things that they were doing to get this under control. But in the audience, after they made their little, this is how great we're doing these things, in the audience there were parents and teachers, both white and black. It didn't make any difference, and they were complaining that the same troublemakers are not being disciplined. They're not being punished. And what does that tell people? That tells it that, hey, that reinforces bad behavior, all right? Said, okay, you can keep on going doing all this stuff. It also tells the teachers, I don't have control of my classroom because I'm not getting the support from my administrators. And then you think about the students who are orderly students, and they say this, these people who are disruptors get away with it, and some of them may be bullies also, and they're getting away with it, even though they say, oh, we're going to take care of bullies. That tells those kids, that tells them that, hey, I'm afraid now even to go to the classroom because they're not being punished, the bullies or whatever, not being punished, and they may come after me next. So I don't doubt that you see people saying, well, maybe my absenteeism, I'm going to start being absent. And you can see, well, maybe even parents are saying, I don't feel safe to have him, I just concerned about my child going to a school that is unsafe. That's just, all of that, you put that together, no wonder sometimes you get chronic absenteeism and the low scores because you don't have an orderly classroom. I used to be a teacher, and all it takes is one or two to mess up the whole thing. So you got to have order, and our country was based on order. I mean, granted, we don't always have order, of course. I mean, but it's something that, being a military, as a retired Lieutenant Colonel Air Force, fighter pilot, and a Pentagon planner, we were given orders. We respected our leaders because they were consistent. They gave us a pattern of behavior, and they were consistently made us to follow that. And then when you went to combat, you were willing to follow them into places that were pretty dangerous. In fact, regularly getting shot at almost all my missions. So that's too long of a story, but that's the story. Well, I think a lot of times is the end of year or the end of course test is really what makes the decision whether the student passes or goes on to the next grade. Because I know I saw that when I was at the Global Leadership Academy, where I taught there for a while. And that's going to be one of the key things. Yes, the growth I think is an important milestone, but that end of year, end of course test, and there are going to be regular tests through CMS, because if it's still the same way that when I was there, you had regular tests going along through the year just to make sure that the pattern was going the same. So I would say we need to hold off before we make any judgments about how well it is. But it is encouraging to hear that the growth rate is up. But I don't know all the particulars about what are the ingredients of those growth rates. And I know that some people argue against the single test. I can understand that because it's just like you're out there on the golf course, and you got to make this perfect drive. It doesn't always happen, right? So that's where you want to see something a little bit different way of, I guess, showing the metrics of how to be able to discriminate on how well this student is and how competent they are in knowing their subject. And if I can divert onto something a little bit, all right? Okay. Talking about that is that I've been very concerned about the social promotions. And if you look at the score rate, like the reading rates, like of the third grade, were just horrific. I mean, horrible. And the same thing, even in some of the math thing in high school, and even some of the schools in District 1, were not that good. And if you look at that, how can we start turning that around? And even though I get back to my three little legs that I've been talking about in the way of the woke, but we need some way to be able to help these students to get back, because if they lose a year because of the COVID, I've read where they could be 2 to 3 years behind because of that. And that's going to take a miracle to get these students back up. And if you stay on a social promotion, I'm a certified flight instructor, and there's no way that I would solo my student unless he or she I felt was totally competent to be able to take that airplane off by themselves and come back and land by themselves. All right? But the ladies on this school board are pushing these students forward. And that is the worst thing I think they can do, because it ensures failure in the future. And that's what I'm afraid of about, you're talking about the growth. The growth may be good, but I don't know what all the metrics are in that growth. And if they have been moved ahead with these very poor grades ahead, what are they, in other words, are they third grade reading and going to fourth, or are they still still third grade and made a little bit of progress? So that's where I would be questioning. Right, I mean, you are, exactly. And so the way to convince them, I think, is that it takes a total structural change, I think. I mean, I go back, I'm sorry to keep harping about the thing about you got to go back to where you're disciplining the children, and you got to go back to where you're promoting character and not trying to say, well, because I'm black, I can blame things on white people. That just robs children of their self-worth and their will to improve. We need to push so if we can go back to the thing where we're pushing this idea of character, where we are setting behavior standards, and the third one is where we're not manipulating and screwing up their minds about their sexual identity. In other words, that, hey, you're male and female, and that's what God had in mind for you. Because we're all built for a purpose. And I think all that's going to, I think if a parent says, hey, I'm uncomfortable with that, I think they'll say, hey, I'll go back to public schools. Because in the public schools, at least you got a bus to get back and forth to school, where you don't get it in a charter school. Even though I've substituted taught in charter schools, and they are more orderly, I must admit, from what I saw in the public schools. So there's a greater discipline. Teachers have a little bit more leeway of how to be able to teach their subject, which I think is a very important thing. And of course, if you go to the private school or to the religious schools, they're going to have a lot more, I guess, a more morality bringing in there. And that's, again, back to standards of behavior, where what is right and what is wrong. Because if everybody, I think, followed that, then I think we'd have a lot more orderly society. And I think but I must encourage is that parents who are uncomfortable with what's going on in the school system, I think that the homeschooling is offering some pretty good avenues, because I think it brings the families together. Because that's one of the key elements, I think, we're losing sight of the family, of having the school system take over the family's role, and it should be more the family. The parents are the first educators. So I hope I'm not going too long on you in here, but because I think that's going to bring the family involved in this, and then you'll get the dialogue with the parent, and in homeschooling also has the opportunity where there are other homeschoolers together, where there may be a mom or a dad who has got some experience in math or physics or chemistry or whatever that can help. And I've seen this because my youngest daughter was homeschooled, and until the sixth grade, until she went, sixth grade. So I think that's it's a viable thing, and it works. I hope that's too long for you. Well, obviously there's they only get so much money. Okay, so salary is an issue. But if some sources within the CMS have told me that some of the teacher exodus is not necessarily because of pay, because they're going to surrounding counties where the teacher pay is less, but guess what? They have more disciplined classrooms. They have a working environment that is supportive. So if you don't discipline the disruptive students, then there's, you can't win. I mean, like, if I went into a classroom every day and I knew the same students were going to be rowdy and just going to disrupt my other students, which used to, you're just like, oh my goodness, because you care so much that your students are learning, and then you have a few bad apples, if I may say, that are disrupting things. And that, you get to a point where as a teacher you say, why am I doing this? I can go be doing something else. I can be a clerk, I could be a manager, work who knows where. There's all kinds of different places, because you've already got a college degree, for crying out loud. So that would be one of the things that I think that the key thing is the discipline. If we don't support teachers with discipline the students, I think we're gonna continue that problem.